George's Marvellous Medicine by Roald Dahl, Part 1. A warning to all listeners. Please do not try to make George's Marvellous Medicine at home. It could be dangerous.
I'm going shopping in the village, so be a good boy and don't get up to mischief. And don't forget to give Grandma her medicine at 11 o'clock.
Grandma, who was dozing in her chair by the window, opened one wicked little eye which spotted George.
Now, you heard what your mother said, George. Don't forget my medicine.
No, Grandma.
And just try to behave yourself for once while she's away.
Yes, Grandma.
George was bored to tears. He didn't have a brother or sister, and his family owned a farm that was miles away from anywhere. He was tired of staring at pigs, cows and sheep all day, and he was especially tired of having to live in the same house as that grisly old grunion of a grandma. Looking after her all by himself was hardly the most exciting way to spend a Saturday morning. George couldn't help disliking his grandma. She was a selfish, grumpy old woman with pale brown teeth and a small puckered-up mouth like a dog's bottom. Most grandmas are lovely, kind, helpful old ladies, but not this one. She spent all day and every day sitting in her chair by the window, and she was always complaining, grousing, grouching, grumbling, grimping on about something or other. She was a miserable old grouch.
You know what's the matter with you? You're growing up too fast. Boys who grow up too fast become stupid and lazy.
But I can't help it if I'm growing fast, Grandma.
Of course you can. Growing's a nasty, childish habit.
But we have to go, Grandma. If we don't, we'd never be grown up.
Rubbish, boy, rubbish. Look at me. Am I growing? Certainly not.
But you did once, Grandma.
Only very little. I gave up growing when I was extremely small, along with all the other nasty childish habits like laziness, disobedience, greed, sloppiness, untidiness and stupidity. It's ridiculous. You're nearly as tall as me already.
George took a good look at Grandma. She certainly was a very tiny person. Her legs were so short, she had to have a footstool to put her feet on, and her head only came halfway up the back of the armchair.
But how do I stop growing, Grandma?
Eat less chocolate.
Does chocolate make you grow?
It makes you grow the wrong way, up instead of down. Never grow up, always down. Eat more cabbage instead.
Cabbage? Oh no, I don't like cabbage.
It's not what you like or what you don't like, it's what's good for you that counts. From now on you must eat cabbage 3 times a day. Mountains of cabbage. And if it's got caterpillars in it, so much the better. Cabbage doesn't taste of anything without a few boiled caterpillars, slugs too.
Not slugs, I can eat slugs.
Whenever I see a live slug on a piece of lettuce, I gobble it up quickly before it crawls away. Delicious.
You're joking, Grandma.
I never joke. Worms and slugs and beetly bugs. Beetles are perhaps the best of all. They go crunch.
Grandma, that's beastly.
The old hag bared her pale brown teeth as she cackled.
Sometimes, if you're lucky, you get a beetle inside the stem of a stick of celery. That's what I like.
Grandma, how could you?
You find all sorts of nice things in sticks of celery. Sometimes it's earwigs.
I don't want to hear about it.
A big, fat earwig is very tasty. But you've got to be quick, my dear. When you put one of those in your mouth, it has a pair of nippers on its back end. And it grabs your tongue. With those, it'll never let go.
Little George stood by the door, staring at the old hag in the chair. She stared back at him. Could it be? George wondered if she was a witch. He had always thought witches were only in fairy tales, but now he wasn't so sure.
Come closer to me, little boy. I will tell you secrets. You mustn't be frightened of your old grandma.
George moved a step back.
Some of us have magic powers that can twist the creatures of this earth into wondrous shapes.
George shivered and took another step back. He began to feel very frightened.
Some of us know secrets that would make your hair stand straight up on end and your eyes pop out of their sockets. We know how to make your nails drop off and teeth grow out of your fingers instead. We know how to have you wake up in the morning with a long tail coming out from behind you.
Grandma, stop.
We know secrets, my dear, about dark places where dark things live and squirm and slither all over each other.
George ran into the kitchen, but just before he slammed the door shut, he heard Grandma say,
It doesn't matter how far you run, you won't ever get away.
George sat down at the kitchen table to calm his nerves. Oh, how he hated Grandma. He really hated that horrid old witchy woman. All of a sudden, George felt a tremendous urge to do something about her. Something whopping, something absolutely terrific. A sort of explosion. He wanted to blow away the witchy smell that hung about her in the next room. He may have been only 8 years old, but he was a brave little boy. He was ready to take this woman on. As George sat there pondering this interesting problem, his eyes fell upon the bottle of Grandma's brown medicine standing on the sideboard. She was always just as horrid after she'd had it as she had been before. The whole point of medicine was to make someone better. If it didn't do that, it was quite useless.
Aha, I'll make her a new one.
George thought about this new medicine that would be so fierce, so fantastic, that it would either cure her or blow off the top of her head. George looked at the kitchen clock. He had just under an hour until 11 o'clock when Grandma was due her next dose.
Here we go then. A magic medicine it would be.
George took an enormous saucepan out of the cupboard and placed it on the kitchen table. George had absolutely no doubts whatsoever about how he was going to make his famous medicine. Whatever it was, if it was runny or powdery or gooey, it went in. George decided to work his way around the house to see what each room had to offer. He went to the bathroom first, all the way upstairs carrying his enormous saucepan. In the bathroom, he put down the pan and set to work, rifling through various bottles and ointments. The first bottle was labelled Golden Hair Gloss Shampoo, which he immediately emptied into the pan.
That ought to wash your tummy nice and clean.
Next, he took a full tube of toothpaste and squeezed out the whole lot of it in one long worm.
Maybe that will brighten up those horrid brown teeth of hers.
There was an aerosol can of shaving foam that George sprayed into the pan, creating a wonderful mountain of white foam. In went a jar of face cream, scarlet nail varnish, hair removal cream, dandruff cure, false teeth cleaning powder, and a big bottle of liquid paraffin. Next, he went into his parents' bedroom. On his mother's dressing table, he found another aerosol labelled Helga's Hair Set, a bottle of perfume, a large round box of powder which had a powder puff on top, which he threw in as well for good luck. He found a couple of lipsticks and pulled the greasy red things out of their little cases and added them to the mixture. The bedroom had nothing more to offer, so George carried the enormous saucepan back downstairs again and trotted into the laundry room, where the shelves were full of all kinds of household items. The first one he took was a large box of washing detergent.
She's a dirty old woman, she'd better have it all.
Next, he found a big tin of floor polish. He scooped the whole lot in and moved on to a carton labelled Flea Powder for Dogs. The carton warned him to keep the powder well away from dog food, as it would make a dog explode if eaten.
Good.
He also found a box of canary seed on the shelf. Back in the kitchen, George put the large saucepan on the table and went over to the cupboards that served as a larder. The shelves were bulging with bottles and jars of every sort. He found some incredibly hot and spicy ingredients and decided to empty them all into the mixture one by one. There was a tin of curry powder, a tin of mustard powder, a bottle of extra hot chilli sauce, a tin of black peppercorns, and a bottle of horseradish sauce.
That should do it.
At this point, George suddenly remembered the animal medicines that his father kept in the shed next to the hen house. He decided the magic mixture definitely needed a touch of the real stuff. George picked up the heavy saucepan and carried it out of the back door. He crossed the farmyard and headed straight to the shed. His father was in the fields haymaking, so he wouldn't be disturbed either. George entered the dusty old shed and put the saucepan on the workbench. He looked up at the medicine shelf, of which contained 5 big bottles.
I'll use them all. Boy, does she need them.
The first bottle he took down contained orange-coloured powder for chickens, with problems such as sore beaks, egg trouble and loss of feathers.
The old bird won't be losing any feathers after she's had a dose of this.
The next bottle contained about 500 gigantic purple pills for horses with sore throats. Then there was a bottle of thick yellowish liquid for poorly cows with various problems such as bad breath, earache, tail ache, headache, hoofache, crumbled horns and sore udders. With a slop and a gurgle, the yellow liquid splashed into the nearly full saucepan. The fourth bottle contained a brilliant red liquid for washing sheep to get rid of ticks and fleas. The last bottle on the shelf was full of pale green pills for pigs. The label stated that only 1 pill should be given to the sick pig, 2 in severe cases, but more than that will make the pig rock and roll.
Just the stuff for that miserable old pig back in the house.
In the kitchen, George put the saucepan on the stove and turned on the gas flame as high as it would go. The stuff in the pot got hotter and hotter, and soon it began to froth and foam. A rich blue smoke, the colour of peacocks, rose from the surface of the liquid, and a fiery, fearsome smell filled the kitchen. It was a brutal and bewitching smell, spicy and staggering, fierce and frenzied, full of wizardry and magic. Whenever he got a whiff of it, firecrackers went off in his skull, and electric prickles ran along the backs of his legs. At one point, he could have sworn he saw bright sparks flashing in the swirling foam. George turned off the heat as he knew he would have to let it cool down before serving it to his grandma. When all the steam and froth had gone away, he peered into the pan and saw that the medicine was now a deep and brilliant blue in colour. George ran outside again into his father's tool shed and found where all the paints were kept. He searched through the rows of colours until he found a dark brown gloss paint, the perfect colour. He took it down to the kitchen and poured the whole lot into the saucepan. He very gently stirred the paint into the mixture, and gradually it turned into a rich, creamy brown. George fetched the bottle of Grandma's real medicine and tipped it down the sink. He then filled the bottle with his own magic mixture. This was it. The magic moment had arrived.
Medicine time, Grandma.
Picking up a silver tablespoon from the sideboard, George made his way into the living room with his marvellous medicine. He couldn't help but think back on all the mad and marvellous things that had gone into the making of this crazy stuff. The shaving foam, the hair remover, the washing powder, the shoe polish, the black pepper, and not to mention the powerful animal pills and powders and liquids and the brown paint.
Open wide.
The old hag opened her small wrinkled mouth for George, and he pushed the spoon well into her mouth. As he stepped back to watch the outcome, Grandma's reaction was instantaneous.
Ooh-wee.
Her whole body shot up with a whoosh into the air. Up she went like a jack-in-the-box. And she didn't come down, she just stayed there, suspended in mid-air, still in a sitting position but rigid, frozen, quivering. Her eyes bulged and her hair stood straight up on the end.
Is something wrong, Grandma?
Grandma was beyond speaking. The shock of George's marvellous mixture was so tremendous, you'd have thought that she'd swallowed a red-hot poker the way she took off from that chair. Then down she came with a plop, back in her seat. George was just about to sigh with relief when right before him, Grandma began to bulge and swell up. She was puffing up all over, as if someone was pumping her up. Was she going to explode? But wait! She had a puncture somewhere. George could hear the hiss of escaping air. She stopped swelling and began to shrink back down, slowly back to her shriveled old self.
How are you, Grandma?
But Grandma didn't reply. Her body gave a sudden sharp twist and a sudden sharp jerk as she flipped herself clear out of the chair, landing neatly on her 2 feet on the carpet. George was fascinated and couldn't wait to see what was next. But it didn't take too long because suddenly she began to grow. Slowly at first, just a gradual inching upwards, but taller and taller every few seconds.
growing up, you're going to hit the ceiling.
But Grandma didn't stop. This ancient, scrawny old woman was getting taller and taller, as though she were a piece of elastic being pulled upwards by invisible hands. As her head reached the ceiling, there was a strange scrunching noise, and bits of plaster and cement came raining down.
Grandma, you better not stop now.
Soon, her head and shoulders had completely disappeared through the ceiling, and she was still going. George dashed upstairs to his own bedroom, and there she was, coming up through the floor like a mushroom.
Terrific medicine, boy. Give me some more.
George was still clutching the medicine bottle, so poured another dose out and popped it in her mouth.
Ooh-wee!
Grandma, that's the attic above you.
Crash! The old girl's head went through the ceiling as though it were butter. George ran downstairs and rushed out the back door into the farmyard. How awful it would be if she came through the roof as well. His father would be furious. And George would be in it then. He had made the medicine and he had given her too much.
Please don't come through the roof, Grandma.
George's Marvellous Medicine by Roald Dahl. George was played by Joshua Hylands, Grandma by Pamela Holden, and Mrs. Cranky was played by Sophie Lewis. Listen to part 2 next week to find out if Grandma really did come through the roof. Or you can play the mini spelling game to test your knowledge of what mad things went into George's Marvellous Medicine.
These screenshots are from my website for Alphabet Radio, an online digital radio station for children to listen to their favourite stories. The homepage indicates different features of the website and the opportunities it offers to children who wish to sign up for an account. This website would broadcast George's Marvellous Medicine and publish pictures sent in by children who have an online account. It also allows young listeners to play an educational game related to the story, as my research found that further visual and digital aids would improve the chance of children listening to a radio drama. When children sign up to create an account with the website, parents are able to keep track of the learning development through their listening and playing of educational games.